Hello everyone, welcome to your next section. Today we are going to focus on the features of scatterplots specifically. So we're going to look at visualizing and styling scatter data, as well as looking at some advanced features that you can do to make your scatterplots look pretty and cool. And I'm also going to spend a very short amount of time showing you how to build a plot straight from a pandas data frame. We're going to try and integrate some of that knowledge from chapter 6 into this section, just so you can see that everything is connected and everything has a use. It's all super important to have all of this all together in order to do what we're going to do in the subsequent chapters. So scatterplots are probably one of the most simplest visualization types. We see them all over the place. But because of that, they also can be one of the most powerful types. Simplicity usually leads to an easier way of interpreting things that are going on around us. So it's really important to learn how scatterplots work because you're going to use them all the time as a data scientist. So what you're going to learn is we're going to do a small section on how to plot data straight from a pandas data frame. It won't take very long at all. It's very simple, but it's cool to see, and you can learn a couple extra things about pandas while you're there. And then we're going to explore scatterplots a little bit more and show you some of the ways that we can color them, change the sizing, and do a bunch of other little manipulations that are unique to scatterplots only. And hopefully, by learning these features, you can start to see, oh, okay, how should I be thinking about data and how I can represent, as much information as I can visually and cleanly at the same time. So just in terms of definitions, guys, scatterplots are a histogram like everything else. They place a marker on your graph, usually a dot or a cross or some kind of point from a Cartesian plane system, meaning XY coordinates. You'll have to remember XY coordinates because we talked about it in previous sections, but it's also something that you should be learning from grade school or very early junior high school. Okay guys, so we're going to look at the syntax of building a plot straight from a pandas data frame and then build out some visualization stuff with scatterplots, showing you some of the extra parameters you can use to color or, play with the features therein. So let's go into our syntax now. Okay everyone, here we are. Actually, we don't need this line here. Let's just cross that out because we're already doing this here. But what you're seeing here is we're going to start with learning how to plot from a pandas data frame. So our first block of code is just initializing all of our packages that we need. We're going to use NumPy to generate some numbers. We have matplotlib for visualization, and we have pandas to load in our data frame. So this first line here is how do you actually create a pandas data frame manually in pandas. I don't really recommend doing this by hand ever, guys, because it's really not the best way to do it. But for this example, we're copying and pasting this in, so it's not a really big deal at all. And it's also useful to show you how to build a pandas data frame from scratch if you ever want to do some more with that kind of stuff. So you'll see pandas dot data frame. It asks for this in regular braces, and then you pass into it a dictionary. And each key is a column, and every value is a list of all of the rows that are going to be represented by that column. So all of these lists have to have the same amount or same length of lists. There are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows, each of them having some values. Let's say you didn't have a value for Lisa here at 33. You still want to put in the comma and just have this as a none type or 0 or just empty, okay? But it's really important to make sure that you, when you're building a data frame like this, that all of the rows are represented by the columns. Otherwise, it's not going to work. I have this commented at the moment, but when we uncomment this, this is really how we plot in pandas. It's really quite simple, guys. So we could just go dataframe.plot, and it'll show us how to do it there. If we wanted to, do this a little bit more manually, we can extract an X and a Y from this data frame by doing this. We first remember how we call some data from a column? We use df in the indexing feature, and we, call the actual column one at a time. And I'm converting this from a pandas, data frame row return into a list. This function is in pandas as well. So that way it's easier for our subplots to read. I'm not sure if it can necessarily handle the pandas data frame type when we pass it into our access parameter here. It's expecting a list, not a pandas object. So we can do this method as well. That's a little bit longer than df.plot here, but it gives us a little bit more control. So we've created our X and Y here, and we've then, called subplots with default one plot. We were asking for a scatter plot, and we add some grid lines there, and then we plot the data. But that's really all I wanted to show you in terms of how you can plot with a pandas data frame. It's really quite simple. You have this one liner right here to do some basic plotting. You can also do a couple lines here to actually give a little bit more dimension and styling to your graph if you want to later on. With that, we're going to move into how to style scatter plots with our axis parameter right here. So you can see the different features that are going to be involved with building awesome scatter plots in Python. So let's move into that syntax now. All right, here it's mostly the same, very simple. Actually, we don't need to import matplotlib twice, but we could do that. Regardless, we import these packages here. And what this is doing is when I produce random numbers, like I'm using another random function here that isn't uniform or randint. I'm using one that's in NumPy as opposed to, or that's just random as opposed to random integer. But, we're producing random numbers every time. But if we want our random numbers to be produced, like the same random numbers to produce every time, we set a seed. And what this is basically saying is, like, in computer science, we have things that are close to true random, but not exactly true random. It's about as close as we'll ever get as humans to, like, representing randomness. But sometimes we want to, like, have that randomness be repetitive, like this, have the same degree of randomness so we can watch how things change as we build our graphs. So what this does, we set a seed, meaning we kind of like tell it what kind of RNG we're going to be expecting, so that we're going to get the same random numbers every time when we call some random function. Okay, so that's what that's doing there. It's just having it so that we can see the same plot over and over again. I'll show you what that looks like what this graph looks like when we remove it. But for now, that's what it is. In this random function, all you need to do is tell it. It's going to give you a bunch of random numbers, and it's just asking you for how many numbers you want. So I just decided to show you this one instead because it's a little bit more simple. So we have 4 numbers. That's what this capital N is saying, or 50 numbers. So we're going to generate 50 random numbers for N and 50 random numbers for Y. And now with our scatter plot, we can actually set a couple extra parameters. We can set the surface area and the color of the dots as well. So we can change this from going from like just having all dots of the same type to having different dots with different sizes and maybe even different colors. This is me trying to show different colors. And so how we do that is we need to pass in area and color variables. So this color variable here is still generating random numbers. It's just saying, okay, for each new random number, generate a new color. Okay, so if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it knows that it needs to create 5 different colors to then choose from that are in order with these X and Y. So if we're getting like numbers like 0, 1, 2 for X and 3, 7, 8 for Y, these end up being our XY coordinates for our Cartesian plane. And then we have another list that is the same length going 1, 3, 5, which are telling it what colors it needs to be. The last thing we're doing here is creating, telling Python that next set of lists that we want to give it is how big we want our dots to be. What is the area of our dots? And if this was some sort of actual data, it could represent maybe something else. But for now, we ended up creating an area variable by multiplying the random number and giving an exponent to make the total area large enough that you can see it. This last parameter here is called alpha. It's just changing the opacity of the dots so you can see through them, okay? I mean, that's basically all we're doing to manipulate our scatter plot. We just created a couple extra variables that are going to represent color and area, and we pass those into our S, surface area, and C color parameters in the dot scatter function in matplotlib. So let's hop into pandas. Let's hop into Jupyter Notebooks now and see how all of this is working together. Okay, so first and foremost, guys, let's start with this set of code. Let's first uncomment this part and comment all this out and see what this graph looks like when we plot it. So remember, we just created a manual data frame, and we're just plotting from the data frame. From this data frame, do a dot plot function in pandas where X is age and Y is number of pets. And let's see what comes out of this. It creates an object, and it's a little bit weird here, but it indeed is creating a plot right from the data frame. Okay, so we can play a little bit more with these parameters if you want, but I really just wanted to show you, like, okay, you have a data frame, you don't want to be going crazy with your matplotlib, you just kind of want to see what's there. Use this .plot function and make sure the parameters are all right for you. Okay, so there's plotting in pandas itself. Now let's just say we have a pandas data frame. We wanted to do a little bit of manipulation to it. We want to, like, age plus 10 or something like that. For this case, I'm just keeping it simple and turning our column of data for age into a list and our column for number of pets into a list, so our matplotlib can read this easily in the axis object. And I'm just creating a scatter plot with some gridding and showing you that data here. So this is like extracting information. This is plotting right directly from a pandas data frame. This is extracting some information from a pandas data frame and then plotting it in the way that we've just learned, which is a lot closer to what we're familiar with now. Okay, that's really it for plotting with pandas data frames. Let's now plot a little bit with a scatter plot and see what these dimensions end up coming out to and looking like. So first off, I want to show you how these random numbers are being generated. I'm going to run this script a couple of times to show you that X is generating a random set of numbers, but it's the same random set of numbers every time. Look at that. I'm running this multiple times and it's the same set of numbers. I'm going to change this seed to 500, and look, we have different numbers now. Let's do 10. And we'll have a different set of numbers once again. So this is setting a seed that it can then populate some random numbers from. Okay? And that's being done for all of these. So you're seeing that it's creating random numbers between 0 and 1. So now that we have a color variable and an area variable, let us see what this scatter plot will then look like. There you go there. So we have different areas, different colors, and different points. The opacity is 0.5, you can see, because as things overlap, they get a little darker. And we're showing the X as this X, Y is this Y, and all these color variables. Let me print to you what colors looks like and what area looks like so you have a sense. So there's colors, and it's generating colors based off of these values. And area, it's telling it how large the surface area of this scatter plot point needs to be to plot. So you'll see all here. That's basically everything, guys. These are some features that we can use to make our scatter plots more beautiful. We might want to add labels and x-axis labels to this because we don't exactly know what it is right now. But these are some specific styling features for scatter plots that are extremely useful. All right, guys, let's do a recap. So we learned about scatter plots. We did we got some additional plotting experience by plotting a pandas data frame, extracting some data from a pandas data frame, and then looking at some of the more advanced stylistic features of scatter plots that you can use to represent more than just X and Y Cartesian coordinates.